General Thorne scoffed. A woman's place is in support, not a cockpit. 20 minutes later, the invisible woman who served his coffee was the only thing standing between his airbase and 6 incoming hostile bogies. For 3 years, Eliza Vance had been a ghost. Not the kind that haunts old buildings, but the kind that exists in plain sight, utterly unseen. At 30 years old, with her striking auburn hair pulled back into a severe, tight bun and ice-blue eyes that saw everything but revealed nothing, she was the administrative anchor of Crestwood Air Force Base, Utah. Every morning at 0600 hours, she was the first one in, her presence marked only by the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the industrial cleaner scent that clung to the briefing rooms. She filed flight plans she could have written herself, answered phones with a voice that was professionally forgettable, and cleaned up after men who held the fate of the skies in their hands. To the pilots of the 422nd Fighter Squadron, the Hornets, she was just Eliza, a piece of the furniture, the background noise in their high-stakes world of supersonic metal and controlled violence. They'd grab a coffee from her without making eye contact, drop a file on her desk with a mumbled thanks, and discuss advanced combat maneuvers over her head as if she were deaf to the language of the sky. The irony was a physical weight in her chest. Eliza Vance, call sign Echo, had been born not just into aviation, but into its royalty. Her father, the late Colonel Spectre Vance, was a name spoken in hushed, reverent tones in the halls of the Pentagon and the smoky bars near air bases worldwide. A legendary test pilot, he had secretly molded his daughter in his own image. Her childhood weekends weren't spent at malls. They were spent at dusty, private airfields, her hands learning the feel of a Cessna's yoke before she could properly drive a car. He taught her aerodynamics with paper planes and dogfighting tactics on a whiteboard in their garage. Using connections that bent every rule, he'd gotten her unofficial training time, precious, unsanctioned hours in F-16s, and even the F-22 Raptor, the apex predator she now served coffee to the pilots of. But when she officially applied for the Air Force Academy, the door was slammed shut. Not for lack of skill, but for the political fallout surrounding her father's death in a classified mission. The official story was a training accident. The truth was far more complicated, buried under layers of national security redactions. So, she took the only job that could get her close to the machine she loved, serving men who should have been her wingmen. The embodiment of the wall she faced was General Marcus Thorne. At 55, with his steel-gray, military-cut hair and a chest so heavy with metals it seemed to tilt his posture, he commanded Crestwood with an iron fist and attitudes forged in the Cold War. To Thorne, a fighter cockpit was a sacred, masculine space. He had a reputation for stonewalling female pilot applications and making his opinions known in unsubtle ways. In his office, framed and hung with the reverence of a holy text, was a quote from a long-dead general. Real pilots rely on instinct, not machines. Every morning, when Eliza delivered his black coffee, he would take it without looking up from his briefs. If he spoke, it was with a dismissive air, a comment about how women were naturally suited for organizational roles. Eliza absorbed the slights in silence, her face a placid mask. Arguing would only confirm his biases. The ghost remained a ghost. The morning of October 28th began like any other. The air was crisp with a Utah desert chill. Eliza had the coffee brewed and the briefing room prepped for a major training exercise, a simulated air-to-air combat scenario against a rival squadron. As the Hornet pilots filed in, their familiar, confident banter filled the room. "Perfect day to hunt," said Captain Razor Jensen, taking a mug from her tray. "Those Navy guys won't know what hit 'em." General Thorne stood before the massive tactical display, a map of the Nevada training range glowing behind him. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice a low rumble of authority, "today's exercise is a defensive screen. 6 simulated bogies will attempt to penetrate our airspace. Your job is to intercept and neutralize. Standard procedure." As he spoke, Eliza moved through the room like a shadow, refilling mugs, her ice blue eyes scanning the tactical display. She wasn't just seeing a map. She was seeing attack vectors, intercept points, and fuel consumption rates. Her father had taught her to see the battle before it began. Wheels up at 1,000 hours, Thorne concluded. Should be a textbook operation. He had no idea how wrong he was. The first sign that the day was deviating from its textbook flight plan wasn't a warning on a radar screen, but a cough. It was a small, dry cough from Lieutenant Miller in the back row. Then Captain Jensen sneezed, a violent, rattling sound that turned heads. Within minutes, the controlled environment of the briefing room began to fray at the edges. As General Thorne was outlining the rules of engagement, the base alarms shrieked to life. It wasn't the pre-scheduled, almost polite tone of the exercise alarm. This was the real one, a frantic, ear-splitting klaxon that signaled an imminent threat. Red lights bathed the room in a hellish glow. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The base commander's voice, tight with urgency, crackled over the intercom. Multiple unidentified aircraft approaching from the east. All combat personnel to their stations immediately. Chaos erupted. Pilots kicked back their chairs, grabbing helmets and racing for the flight line. But the invisible enemy had already struck. Captain Jensen, halfway to the door, stumbled, his face pale and beaded with sweat. He leaned against a wall, a wave of dizziness washing over him. Lieutenant Miller collapsed into his chair, a high fever suddenly raging through him. One by one, a sudden, localized viral outbreak was grounding the squadron's best. It was fast-acting but not lethal. A 24-hour flu-like virus that had apparently swept through the barracks overnight, its symptoms triggered by the adrenaline rush. It was a freak occurrence, a one-in-a-million biological disaster. On the tarmac, the scene was one of organized panic. Ground crews scrambled, fuel trucks sped across the concrete, but the pilots they were serving were falling like flies. Of the 6 pilots assigned to the F-22 Raptors, only 3 made it to their aircraft without succumbing to the debilitating illness. In the command tower, General Thorne's face had morphed from confident commander to a mask of pure panic. He stared at the main tactical display, where 6 red dots, representing the unidentified aircraft, crept steadily closer to the base's restricted airspace. Crestwood wasn't just any base. It housed some of the nation's most sensitive aerospace technology. An attack here would be catastrophic. "Sir," shouted Chief Master Sergeant Reyes, a veteran whose calm demeanor was his trademark, now visibly shaken. "We've only got 3 birds in the air. The bogies are splitting up, coming in on multiple vectors. We need at least 5 Raptors to form a proper defensive screen." Thorne slammed his fist on the console. The red dots were like a virus on his screen, a creeping infection threatening to consume everything he had built. His career, the security of his base, the lives of his people, all hanging by the thread of 3 pilots against 6 unknowns. The pressure cracked his iron composure. "Where are we supposed to find more pilots?" he roared, his voice echoing through the stun tower. He wasn't asking a question. He was venting his utter helplessness. "We can't just grab a clerk from the admin pool. This isn't some damn video game." He turned, his furious gaze sweeping the room, and then he added the words that would haunt him forever. "A woman can't fly a fighter jet." In the deafening silence that followed General Thorne's desperate outburst, a single, deliberate sound cut through the tension. The soft clink of a ceramic coffee pot being placed on a tray. Every head in the command tower turned. Eliza Vance, the ghost, the fixture, stepped out of the corner she had occupied. She moved with a calm that was utterly alien to the panic in the room. She walked directly to the central console where Thorne stood, his face a mixture of fury and despair. Her ice blue eyes met his. "General," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the clarity of a blade. "I can fly." For a moment, Thorne just stared at her, utterly nonplussed. Then, a strangled, incredulous laugh escaped his lips. The tension in the room broke, replaced by a wave of nervous, disbelieving chuckles. The coffee girl. In the middle of a national security crisis, the coffee girl was making a joke. "Ma'am," Thorne said, his voice dripping with a condescension he didn't bother to hide. "This isn't Microsoft Flight Simulator. These are $150 million war machines. Now is not the time for. Colonel Spectre, Vance was my father, Eliza interrupted, her voice as steady as steel. The name dropped into the room like a 500-pound bomb. The laughter died instantly. He trained me. F-16s and F-22s. I have 847 certified flight hours in military-grade aircraft. My call sign is Echo. The silence was now one of shock. Chief Master Sergeant Reyes, who had served under Spectre Vance 2 decades ago, stepped forward, his face ashen. Sir, Spectre Vance? If she's his daughter, if she really has Raptor time? This is insane. Thorne exploded, his prejudice warring with the impossible glimmer of hope. She's a civilian, a contractor. She serves us coffee. I don't care who her father was. I am not putting an untrained. Sir, the radar operator's voice sliced through his tirade. Bogies are now 10 minutes out. They're descending through 25,000 feet. We need birds in the air now. Eliza didn't wait for permission. She turned from the console and walked with purpose to the flight equipment locker at the side of the room. With practiced, efficient movements, she began pulling out a flight suit and helmet. Her actions were fluid, professional, every motion screaming a competence that defied what they thought they knew. Thorne watched, stunned into silence. The woman he had ignored for 3 years was suiting up with the focused grace of a seasoned combat aviator. I could have you court-martialed for this, he said, his voice weak, the threat hollow. You could, Eliza replied, zipping up the flight suit that fit her as if it were custom-made. She turned to face him, her blue eyes burning with an intensity he had never seen. But in 9 minutes, those bogies are going to be firing on your base. Your choice, General. His entire worldview, a structure built over 30 years of military service and unwavering belief in a certain order of things, was collapsing in real time. He looked at the approaching red dots, then at the impossible woman standing before him. It was a choice between his pride and the lives of everyone on his base. The walk to the flight line was a scene suspended in time. Eliza strode across the sun-baked tarmac, her flight suit crisp, her helmet tucked under her arm. Every ground crew member, every mechanic, every remaining pilot stopped what they were doing and stared. It was a vision that broke their reality. The quiet admin assistant, the coffee girl, was walking toward a $150 million F-22 Raptor with the unmistakable bearing of someone who owned the sky. Chief Master Sergeant Reyes had made the call, overriding Thorne's paralysis. Ma'am, he'd said, his voice firm over the comms. You're taking Raptor 741. She's hot, fueled, and fully armed. Your call sign for this mission is Echo Falcon. As Eliza approached the sleek, gray aircraft, it felt like a reunion. Her father had called the Raptor the ghost in the machine, a fighter so advanced it seemed to have a soul of its own. Every switch, every display, every system was an old friend. Her hands twitched with muscle memory. The crew chief, a grizzled staff sergeant named Clark, approached her cautiously, his face a mask of profound confusion. Ma'am, with all due respect, do you actually know how to start this thing? Eliza stopped at the base of the cockpit ladder and looked him in the eye. The calm, impassive expression he was used to was gone, replaced by a focused fire. Sergeant, she said, her voice low and clear, I could start this aircraft blindfolded in a hurricane. The only question is whether your general has the courage to let me save his base. She ascended the ladder and settled into the pilot's seat. It was like coming home. Her hands moved with an unconscious, fluid grace across the control panels, flipping switches and initializing systems. Master power on. APU start. Engine start sequence initiated. Avionics online. The twin Pratt & Whitney engines spooled up with their signature, soul-stirring whine. The ghost in the machine was awake. In the command tower, General Thorne watched through high-powered binoculars, his hands shaking. The impossible was unfolding before his eyes. The woman who had been invisible to him was performing startup procedures with a precision that would make a seasoned instructor weep with joy. Sir, the air traffic controller said, his voice trembling slightly. Echo Falcon is requesting immediate takeoff clearance. Thorne grabbed the radio microphone. This decision would either be the salvation of his command or the end of his career. There was no in-between. "Echo Falcon, this is Tower," he choked out. You are cleared for immediate takeoff. God help us all." Eliza's voice came back, a stark contrast to his own. Calm, professional, and utterly in control. "Tower, Echo Falcon is rolling. Time to see what Dad taught me." The F-22 accelerated down the runway like a silver spear thrown by a god. At 180 knots, Eliza pulled back on the stick, and the aircraft leaped into the bright Utah sky, not with the brute force of a machine, but with a supernatural grace. In the tower, a collective gasp went through the room. "All stations, this is Echo Falcon." Her voice crackled over the squadron's tactical frequency. "Climbing to 40,000, heading east to intercept. Let's show these visitors they picked the wrong sky." At 45,000 feet, where the sky is a deep, bruised purple, Eliza Vance became a predator. Her radar lit up with the 6 incoming aircraft, flying in a tight, aggressive formation. But their electronic signatures were wrong. These weren't the F-16s of the rival squadron. They were foreign, modified, and flying with a purpose that was anything but training. "Tower, this is Echo Falcon," she reported, her voice devoid of emotion. "I have 6 confirmed bogeys. These are not friendlies. Repeat, these are not friendlies. Recommend engaging as hostile." In the cockpit, surrounded by the glow of her displays, Eliza smiled for the first time in 3 years. Her father's voice whispered in her memory, "When the moment comes, Echo, don't just fly. Dance." The first enemy aircraft never saw her. Using the F-22's legendary stealth, she had positioned herself perfectly, diving out of the blinding glare of the sun. Her first AMRAAM missile was a silent, hypersonic messenger of death, already halfway to its target before the enemy pilot's warning receiver even screamed. Fox 3, she called calmly, the official term for a long-range missile launch. A heartbeat later, a brilliant flash blossomed against the blue canvas below. Splash 1. In the command tower, a stunned silence held sway as one of the 6 red dots on the screen simply vanished. "Holy hell," whispered one of the grounded pilots. She actually did it. The remaining 5 enemy aircraft broke formation, scattering in panic. They knew they were being hunted, but they couldn't see their hunter. They were fighting a ghost. This was their critical mistake. They thought they were fighting one desperate pilot. They had no idea they were facing the protege of Spectre Vance, a woman trained to think in 3 dimensions and see the battle 5 moves ahead. "Echo Falcon, you have 2 bogeys maneuvering to your 6 o'clock, the radar operator called out, his voice tight with alarm. "Copy, Tower. I see them," Eliza replied. "Dad always said the best defense is making sure the other guy is too dead to shoot." She pulled the Raptor into a maneuver that defied physics. A high-G, post-stall turn that should have ripped the wings off a lesser aircraft. The G-forces pressed her in her seat, but her training took over. In seconds, she was behind her pursuers. Her next missile launch was a blur of motion. Fox 3. Splash 2. General Thorne was now standing at the tower window, binoculars pressed to his eyes, watching the impossible ballet of contrails in the distant sky. It was a deadly dance of predator and prey, and the woman he had dismissed as a coffee girl was the prima ballerina. "Sir," Chief Reyes said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "I've never seen anyone fly like that. The maneuvers, the timing, it's like her father," Thorne finished, his voice barely a whisper. The 3rd and 4th kills were a masterclass in tactical dominance. She split the remaining formation, forcing them into a defensive posture, then picked them off one by one with cold, calculated precision. "Negative, Tower," she responded to a call to return. "Still have 2 bogeys making a run for the base. This isn't over." The final 2 enemy pilots were desperate. They flew straight and level, a mad dash for the base, hoping to inflict damage before they were destroyed. It was a fatal error. Eliza dropped to low altitude, becoming a ghost in the ground clutter, then rocketed up behind them. Her final 2 missiles launched simultaneously. Fox 3. Fox 3, Splash 5 and 6. All bogies are destroyed. The radio went silent. The sky was empty. 6 hostile aircraft had been erased from existence in under 20 minutes. Then, Chief Reyes's voice, thick with emotion, came over the comms. Echo Falcon, outstanding work. The base is secure. You are cleared to return for landing. Copy, Tower, Eliza's voice replied, as calm as if she'd just finished filing paperwork. Echo Falcon is inbound. There was a slight pause. And Tower, tell the general his coffee is getting cold. When the F-22 taxied to a stop on the flight line, it was to a world transformed. The usual noise of the tarmac was gone, replaced by an absolute, profound silence. Every pilot, every ground crew member, every available person on the base had formed a massive, silent crowd, their faces a mixture of awe, disbelief, and reverence. They were all staring at the woman who had single-handedly saved them. General Thorne walked slowly through the parted sea of people. His face was pale, his hands no longer shaking but held with a rigid stillness. When he reached the nose of the Raptor, he stopped and looked up at Eliza as she opened the canopy. He slowly, deliberately removed his cap. Then, for the first time in his 30-year career, General Marcus Thorne rendered a sharp, perfect salute to someone who outranked him not in title, but in sheer, undeniable skill. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying across the silent flight line, raw and heavy with the weight of his epiphany. "I owe you an apology. I owe this base an apology. And I owe the memory of your father the respect I should have shown from the very beginning." Eliza climbed down from the cockpit, pulling off her helmet. Her auburn hair was damp with sweat, but her ice blue eyes were bright with the fire of combat. "General," she said, her voice steady, "all I ever wanted was a chance to serve, the way my father taught me." Thorne looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. He then turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming with newfound conviction, "let me introduce you to Captain Amanda Collins. Effective immediately, she is the newest pilot in the 422nd Fighter Squadron." A roar of cheers erupted from the crowd, but Eliza held up a hand for silence. "Sir," she said, looking directly at Thorne, "I appreciate the offer, but I need to know, will you judge me by my performance in that cockpit, or by the assumptions you made while I was serving coffee?" Thorne's answer would become a legend in military aviation. "Captain," he said, his voice unwavering, "after what I witnessed today, I will judge you as your father would have, as one of the finest damn pilots I have ever seen." 3 months later, Captain Echo Vance was not just a pilot. She was a flight instructor specializing in advanced air-to-air combat tactics. The framed quote in General Thorne's office was gone. In its place was a simple, new plaque. Real pilots prove themselves in the sky, not in the briefing room. And every morning at 0600, when new pilots arrived for training, they found their coffee waiting, a silent reminder that respect is earned in action, not assumed by rank, and that heroes often come disguised as the people you see every day, but never truly notice. Have you ever witnessed someone shatter expectations so completely that it changed everyone around them? Share this story with someone who needs the strength to break their own labels. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of unsung heroes. In the comments below, share your own story of proving someone wrong. And please, comment with respect. Everyone deserves to be seen.